ask Professor Domnica Rădulescu. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I have issues with the A with the reversed uh, diacritic accent. Domnica Rădulescu is an American writer of Romanian origin living in the United States, where she arrived in 1983 as a political refugee. From the communist dictatorship of her native Romania, she settled in Chicago, where she obtained a master's degree in comparative literature and a PhD in Romance languages from the University of Chicago. She is the Edwin A. Morris Professor of Comparative Literature at Washington and Lee University. For today's talk, the title is In Between and Hyphenated Spaces. The presentation will offer a window into her meandering journeys throughout the cultural, linguistic, and geographic landscapes that define her existence as an immigrant and citizen of the world, and the ways in which these journeys and negotiations have been processed in several of her most successful works of creative fiction and non-fiction. As part of the presentation, she will read select passages from her recent memoir, Dream in a Suitcase, and from her novels. Professor Rădulescu, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for this wonderful occasion. I'll jump right into it. So I love etymologies. I think they take us back to origins, and they help us rediscover and acquire meanings. So diaspora, the etymology of diaspora, very interesting. Was used in 1825, was used in reference to Moravian Protestants. In 1869, in reference to the dispersion of the Jews. It comes from the Greek dispersion from diasperein, to scatter about, to disperse, from dia, about, cross. And so again, it's about to scatter. The Greek word was used in Septuagint in Deuteronomy 28. It's also the Hebrew word for it is galus, which means exile. And the early word for it in English was the Latinate dispersion. It's interesting, right? That in its own meaning, the word diaspora contains the in-between, the hyphenated, the scattered, in a way, a crumbling of existence. This aspect of the exilic, uprooting, rerouting journey permeates most of my work, my scholarly, my fictional, my memorialistic, theatrical, essayistic work, as I navigate between various genres in the creative writing area, as well as constant negotiations between the critical and the creative. Because I believe exile produces an ontological mutation and transformation. So, in other words, you once exiled, you cannot unexile yourself, even if you are to resettle back into the country of birth. This dimension has profoundly influenced and determined not just the content of my works, but the style, the aesthetic, and the form of my writing. And I place myself within the larger a community of exile writers who write in English as a second language. And as a scholar, I have worked on and explored the various stylistic peculiarities that illustrate a form of exilic writing. And because I believe that form is politics as much as politics is politics. So, therefore, my writing is characterized by a certain fractured nature, about a certain circularity or spiraling, as if always returning to a point of departure, but yet slightly different, shape-shifting, hybridic forms, because writing and creation emerge from the body as much as from the mind. And therefore, it is going to reflect the chameleonic nature of the exilic experience and the exiled person. In light of Virgil Nemoianu's theories of literature as a preservation of defeat in his work on imperfection and sort of celebrating failure, and paradoxically as a force of renewal, I pursue the transformation of the experience of exile and displacement, largely through its manifestations in literary creations, in particular theater and fiction. In my work, as I create myself, and as well as in the works of other fellow exile or immigrant writers. In this exploration, I am interested in the ways in which the imperfection of exile meets the relaxed imperfection and smiling defeat that, according to Nemoyanu, is literature, thus creating a glorious form of imperfection that is envisioning possibilities and nursing dreams. While exile is a loss, and a profound one at that, it is also a form of rebirth. And in the cases of political exile, an extreme measure of finding freedom from oppression, war, genocide. Equally, while literature is considered secondary to history, by and large, literature departments are often less important, considered, and are the ones that always suffer the cuts, right? And considered secondary to history and social science with regard to factual truth and historical facts. It is also, in Nemoyanu's words, a force of renewal, precisely because it partakes of irrationality, randomness and surprise, rejection and dispersion, namely of what is most authentically representative of the organized chaos that is our human journey on Earth. I will quote a couple of lines from a very dear playwright, very little known poet and playwright, Aglaia Veterani, who was very successful in Switzerland, writing in German, and who tragically committed suicide still at the height of her power. And she writes gorgeously about the experience of this brokenness of exile in her work titled, interestingly and sort of tragicomically, Why the Child is Boiling in the Polenta, or Why the Baby is Boiling in the Polenta. It's a book worth reading. And she says, "This house is a home," my sister says. "Here you have to put on a lot of weight, or else you'll be crushed by the mountains. And you need lots of skin to get warm. And then I let my skin fall to the ground. In a foreign country, my family is like shattered glass. We must never grow fond of anything. How many places are foreign countries?" Veterani's discourse has no reverence for logical syntax, chronology, or continuity of space, as it is the product of a life on the road and the consciousness in translation. Languages, relations to space, relations to self are all like shattered glass. Now about my own navigations through literature and in my work. In between my nomadic lives, several picaresque heroines came to life in my novels and plays, as I find myself in perpetual revolutions between critical inquiries, dramatic embodiments, and imagined lives, in a never-ending pool between different countries, cultures, between belonging and rootlessness. As Bell Hooks has said in one of her most beautiful essays, I keep trying to find in the margins a space of radical openness. My heroines create utopian spaces of courage and inventiveness, color and passion out of broken hearts, losses, and displacements, and attempt to create alternative Americas, alternative ways of being in the world. And they question the very shapes in which we have gotten used to tell stories of violence, oppression, and suffering. As a writer, scholar, artist, teacher who lives in and creates and teaches in languages other than her own native language, one must be, in the words of Hélène Cixous, another favorite feminist theorist of mine, a thief of language, une voleuse de langue, or in the French, yes, it's in the French innuendo, une voleuse de langue, which means beautifully both to fly with language and to steal language. Cixous urges female artists to be thieves of language and thus make up for the fact that they have been excluded from language and relegated to the realm of silence. As a female exiled artist, and I always like to stress the gendered aspect of my immigrant writing, I am doubly a thief of language, of several languages, as I tell my stories, as my heroines tell their stories in languages other than their native ones. For instance, in my first novel, Train to Trieste, right here, that was published in 2008, and then in 13 other languages, including in French, Un train pour Trieste avec Belfond. The heroine Mona confesses that sometimes I want to steal everybody else's country and miss it. Having to give up, forsake, relinquish our own first familiar native cities, landscapes, and stories forever, we have to appropriate and make our own the adoptive or adoptive cities and landscapes. My heroine is doing her damnedest to spill her past, her memories, her language onto her American Chicago environment. She brings it all together. Her past, her present, her memories, and her living moment, her languages, culture, spaces into a carefully sewn, colorful quilt. She says, slowly in the Chicago cold, I learn how to live within freedom. I make a little space for myself within its wild vastness. And there is me, the little piece of me in the mosaic of America. Do you see me there? I'm the one with a maroon down coat from a secondhand store and gray boots that are too tight for my frostbitten feet. I'm right there standing on State Street between the Russian woman selling apples and bananas and the Mexican man with a hot dog stand. Do you see me now? In my search for the real and desire to hold on to the real, I turn to live theater and performance as the ultimate forms of expression that offer us a sanctuary from the banality of evil, in the words of Hannah Arendt. Unlike narrative, theater offers the delicious opportunity of embodying concepts and using the actor's body on stage to incarnate otherwise abstract notions, revolutionary ideas, and ineffable realities. It also offers the possibility for those of us whose identities are splintered across countries and languages to re-embody and play with our diverse selves and bring them all together in a cathartic manner on stage. The barrage of images, subliminal advertising, the myriad forms of technological modes of communication that exclude physical presence of the individual, exactly what we're doing right now, which is such a frustrating, such a coitus interruptus kind of experience, but it's the best we have. The body, voice, live presence of people have created new strategies of estrangement and oppression of the individual. It is why I passionately cling to the experience of the live body of the actor that creates meaning on stage and to the sacred relation established between the actor's body and the presence of a live audience. My heroines are survivors who find meaning, conquer trauma, and reinvent a comforting version of home while reinventing themselves on the move. They're travelers whose journeys are as heroic as they're obstacle-ridden, and they initiate new trajectories for the creation of a world based on love, imagination, collaboration, and humor. And these are a couple of lines from my play titled Exile is My Home, a sci-fi immigrant fairy tale, which was recently, a part of which was recently produced in New York at Romanian Cultural Institute. Mina says, I was born in exile. Where were you born? Lena, I was born on the way to the market. Mina, oh, that makes sense. That's why we get along. Why we sort of get along. In any case, it's better than with the others who were born somewhere precise. Good for us that we're born in the air. Lena, nowhere. Mina, out there. Lena, in the air. Mina, if it wasn't so damn inconvenient to spend one's life on the road, I would say living in constant exile is the best home there is. And now a few lines about who I am from an essay that I published several years ago titled Thief of Cities and My Heartbreak Homes. I am a city thief from a Balkan country, once communist, once fascist, once invaded by Turks, Slavs, Goths, Visigoths, Greeks, Habsburgs, Romans, so on and on and on. I have no idea who my people are, though they think of themselves as direct descendants of the Romans. I come from a population of invaded people, crossroads people who think it's always someone else's fault, who paint icons on glass, make music on a blade of grass, or start a new trend in sculpture after walking to Paris all the way from a village in the Carpathians. When I say city thief, I don't mean I steal things in cities, but I steal entire cities with all the things and people in them. Once in recent history, a group of my people vagabonding in a European country stole not just money out of an ATM machine, but pulled out the entire ATM machine after them. I thought, there's my people, all or nothing. I have what to be proud of. I'm a hungry girl from a famished country who wants it all, but mostly cities and countries. I'm not proud to be this or that, like part of a country or a nationality or a community, proud to be an American, for example, or United We Stand, or In God We Trust, or God Bless America. I am incompetent in the language of national pride. I have an accent and mispronounce the vowels. I curse in public places and don't believe in God. I don't pledge allegiance, and I don't say bless you when somebody sneezes. More about stealing countries. In my second novel, Black Sea Twilight, published in 2010 and 2011, my heroine says in a chapter titled Stealing the French Landscape, As our trip continued through little towns and small Gothic churches and cafes in the center of big towns with Baroque architecture and large avenues, through hilly regions with stone houses hidden deep in the shade of pine trees or by rocky seashores and beaches, I strangely started to reconnect to my Romanian past and to the landscapes of my 19 years of life spent in my country. That was no longer my country. Because I had no country, I took possession of all the countries. France was just a continuation of Romania with a stupid line of political division between them. The Atlantic was going to be my Black Sea. The Mediterranean, whenever we got to it, was going to be my Black Sea too. No wonder the natives were afraid of refugees, for not only did we take away the French people's jobs, as the saying went, but we greedily took away their mountains and oceans and lavender fields, their Gothic churches and classical theaters, and transformed them into as many countries as we had come from. We swallowed everything in our hungry stomachs and psyches, us refugees, and jumbled up frontiers and borders, mixed languages, wore strident clothing, and spilled our violent and messy stories all over neoclassical cities and shiny green countrysides. And I will close with a couple of passages that illustrate my geographical and cultural promiscuity. I won't talk about my other promiscuities. A ménage à trois, between the three real and imaginary homes I navigate on a daily basis, from my recently published memoir, Dream in a Suitcase, the story of an immigrant life, that reveals some rare moments or epiphanies of wholeness, of simultaneity, of living in 2 or 3 places at the same time, that are Romania, the United States, and France, the love of my life. Of making a home out of precisely the chasm that separates the two of me, the one before and the one after the experience of exile. One of the passages is also about the motherhood, as other than my creativity being my home, my children have also rooted me and have been my home. Somewhere along the way in this Provençal summer, bursting with azaleas, jasmine, the demented blues of sky and water, theater and irresistible courtships, my body grows into something new and mystical. My impertinent senses and greed for life finally find their voice and take over. I let it happen because I know it's short-lived, and I know women and mothers aren't supposed to experience this totality of carnal and romantic thrill they make for unlikable neighbors and unacceptable novel characters. I know by the end of the summer, I will be in a small Southern American town, sitting in a stupid faculty meeting where balding white men sing their own praises, or arguing with one of my son's school teachers over an unfair grade. America is where you make money. France is where you love and enjoy life. But I have now, and I'm riding this magnificent wave as I'm riding in the back of a motorcycle with my blue-eyed friend along the French Riviera. And then the other epiphany, a winter one, the chapter called Marriage on the Blue Ridge. The smell of snow and wood-burning stoves in the vicinity, the moon flooding earth, the swooshing of the sleds through the cold wind, the yelps and laughs of the children, conjure up a memory of your own childhood a century ago and on another planet in Brasov where you did the same. Your husband looks at the three of you amused and loving as you're gliding past him on the small sleds you bought at Kmart. Maybe this time you got all the pieces together and it's going to work. You confidently take refuge in the cliche American expressions like you're going to make it work, you will make it, as if you're talking about a factory machine that became dysfunctional and is going to be repaired and be all right. Somewhere in the combination of moonlight, solid cold, iridescent snow, the wood-burning stoves, and children's unhinged shouts, you find a place in yourself that is luminous, solid, and unbroken, the place from where you love and imagine. And in that very place of light and imagination, the memory of you sledding as a child in the Carpathians marries this full to the brim moment of you sledding with your own children in the Appalachians. It cleaves the past you with a present you in a seamless, grounded, glowing piece of you. All of you is right here, right now, under the full winter moon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Rădulescu. Thank you very much for concluding this panel.